All right, welcome back to Getting Past the Premium, everybody. Here today, I've got a special guest with me today that I've gotten to know a little bit through some of the technology side of the business. And I'm super excited to bring Ammar on, who is the CEO and founder of Brightside AI. And excited to have this conversation today. And Aaron, how you doing today?
I'm doing excellent, Elliot. Really appreciate you having me on today.
Yeah, it's been fun to kind of walk through some of our conversations around what you guys are building. And you're right in the thick of the cutting edge of technology in our industry right now. And so I'm excited to kind of dive into not only what you guys are doing, but get your thoughts on the industry as a whole. So let's start, if you don't mind, just giving your background in the industry. Like, who are you, and how did you get to what you're doing today?
Yeah, for sure, Elliot. So I'd say I cut my chops in the underwriting world over at Travelers. So underwriting kind of commercial accounts and did that for a number of years. I'll give you guys a 10,000 foot view, then transition into an enterprise risk management role. And with AXA XL nowadays, and kind of pre some of the acquisitions that they had there, and really looking at all sorts of risk across the organization: underwriting risk, asset risk, investment risk, and through that, we ended up leading their emerging risk committee, and there was a couple of us that identified the sharing and on-demand economy as kind of not only a risk but an opportunity. Think all the app-based accounts,
Oh
so
yeah.
Lyft, Airbnb, and the list goes on. Nowadays, I don't think we know a world without that.
Yeah, no
And we,
kidding.
we set out to create an operation, an MGA, that was specifically focused on those accounts commercially. And so we started up that company providing bespoke solutions. That was really kind of, how can you do insurance by the mile, by the minute, by the night? Yeah,
Mm,
and really kind of, I would say, kind of creative solutions on that. We ended up getting acquired by the Hartford, so I spent a little bit of time over at the Hartford, and then ended up reconnecting with one of my early clients, a company called
oh,
Outdoorsy, the Airbnb of RVs.
yeah.
And so ended up joining them as their chief insurance officer. So ultimately ran their insurance operations and other kind of things more broadly, claims, et cetera. And I would say through that process, we had a kind of, I would say, call it a brand, a feature within, and we called it Roamly, and really kind of on the insurance operations as a whole. And so with that, we spun Roamly out of the company, and Outdoors and Roamly ultimately sister companies, and really being able to provide RV insurance across the board. So personal lines, RV insurance, commercial lines, and now we're doing a lot more, or now Roamly is really doing a lot more in terms of powering different marketplaces. And it was through that process, ultimately ran all of their insurance operations. And I'm sure you can imagine when you have to hand out a big rig, which
Yeah.
oftentimes is somebody's most kind of second most valuable asset aside from their house, they want to make sure they have insurance on it.
Yeah.
And so that
I'm
was
guessing.
a big business within it. And we ultimately ran that. But throughout all of these experiences all along, really understanding and recognizing that a lot of paperwork goes back and forth in the insurance industry. And so how can we make it easier using AI?
Yeah.
And so hence the beginnings of Brightside, which was ultimately to be able to leverage AI to be able to make managing insurance easier, and now specifically focused on kind of agents and brokers to be able to increase their productivity and optimize really kind of their output across the board. So that's your 10,000 foot view, without
Yeah.
getting into kind of the nitty gritty of it all. And but fun times, fun times.
Yeah. Well, I think it's important too because, you've lived a lot of sides of the industry, which I'm a big fan of. There's a lot of quote unquote insure tech out there that are, disruptors, people outside the industry that just think, they can come in and revolutionize insurance without an insurance background. And so I think when you have folks like you and us that have lived in the industry for our careers, right? You understand what needs to be done. You understand the challenges that, brokers and agents and advisors face, and ultimately how we can use technology to deliver a better product to our clients and so on and so forth. And so it's refreshing to when I have these conversations with somebody that's been in the industry and can speak to that, right? Um, so talk through kind of that, when you were contemplating starting Brightside, before we get into actually what the product is and does and everything, which I think is phenomenal. you know, when you're evaluating that, like what made you kind of get excited about bringing some sort of an AI solution to the insurance industry? Um, and how do you think the industry, or where do you think the industry is at today with it? I guess is what I'm asking.
Yeah, yeah. So I would say the initial excitement around AI, and really kind of I'd say even more specifically generative AI as a whole, is really just being able to parse through documents, parse through information in a significantly faster way. And so as I sat back and realized that when you've got to handle a dozen plus coverages across an organization, that you're completing applications every single time for every line of business, every single year. You're pulling together underwriting submissions across the board every single time as well. You started to kind of ask myself the question, if this is taking up this much time for me right now, that's lived in insurance and understands it, what about all the other folks that are managing insurance right now that may not have lived and breathed this their entire careers? Imagine that learning curve. Imagine
Yeah.
that amount of time that they have to spend on it. And so I would say really the excitement level came from really living and understanding the pain point firsthand. I mean, and understanding it, recognizing where you got to dot the I's and where you have to cross the T's.
Yeah.
And sat back and said, you know what, there has to be an easier way to be able to do this. And then when you actually start to dig into it, you realize, wow, there actually is leveraging AI. So why don't, if it's making my life easier, that's been living and breathing insurance, it's got to be able to make somebody else's life easier that may not have been focused on it as much. And so early on, it was one, hey, how can you make companies' lives a little bit easier? You know, insureds for all intents and purposes, but then very quickly saw and realized that yes, it would make their lives a little bit easier. It would definitely make their lives easier. But what about the agents and the brokers who are doing this all day, every single day to be
Yeah.
able to help their clients? Imagine being able to analyze insurance at a granular level in 1 minute compared to 10 hours. You
Yeah.
know, so we're not even talking about 10x efficiency here in many cases. We're talking about much, much, much more than that. And so I would say that's really kind of what excited me about, I'd say, kind of the journey and being able to leverage AI, especially in what I would kind of call more of an industry that isn't always so ready for the disruption, or an industry that wouldn't, I would say, kind of be on that the forefront like some other industries that exist out there, just recognizing how much risk and money could potentially be involved for a number of organizations. So that's a little bit of the excitement level and the opportunity that I saw kind of early on. And then to your second question around where we at in the industry. Well, what I would say right now in terms of the industry is obviously we're at the very tip of the spear.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it's one where I think this is for all industries as a whole. And even more so, I would say for the insurance.
Yeah.
And so you
It's
take
exciting though. I mean, when you think about that, like you don't see this happen all that often, right? Where this could be this big of a shift.
No, no, it's a generational shift, just as cell phones changed the game in terms of how
Yeah.
we operate. The internet changed the game in terms of how we operate. Now, generative AI is fundamentally changing the game in terms of how we operate.
Yeah.
And it's fun to be able to be at that tip of the spear right now. But what that also involves is a major behavioral shift in terms of how people interact and work with AI too. I think everybody recognizes the extreme benefits, but I think also in a balancing act, also recognize the risks that come
Hmm.
along with it as well too. And so I would say you oftentimes, what I'm finding right now through conversations, you're finding two camps. You are oftentimes seeing people that recognize it and know that it's changing. You also have the other side that isn't ready yet for it, but feels like they should be. You
Yeah.
know, so a lot of it turns into education. You know, a lot of it turns into creating a new muscle that just hasn't ever kind of really been worked out before, and that's leveraging and using AI. And the analogy that I will often use with where we're at in the industry is that AI will only get better right now.
Yeah.
Of course, there are risks that have to be mitigated with it, but I would almost liken it to, if you remember the days of kind of the insurance where you have the dial-up versus kind of where we're at right now, where you kind of not any, you can't have somebody on the phone at the same time you've got the dial-up going. We're in that dial-up stage of AI right now, where it's getting better. People are working out the kinks, that the accuracy is improving. We do have to be aware about hallucinations to make sure that it's not coming back with inaccurate information. And how do we mitigate that? But it's at a time where people, I think, are seeing the need to be able to leverage AI. I think the ones that adopt it sooner than later will have a heads up. We'll have a big jump start
Yeah.
on other shops that aren't using it. I don't think that this is a technology that will not be used across all shops. I think 5 years from now, even shorter, I don't think there will be really many businesses at all that are not leveraging AI in some form or capacity as a whole. So it's moving very, very fast right now.
Yeah, I mean, you're seeing it built into like every app now has some sort of quote unquote AI. It's all over the place. And so I appreciate you answering my two questions in one. You did that very well. That's a good tip to folks out there from a sales perspective. Is never ask two questions at once, right? But so I want to go back to kind of your first answer because I 1,000% agree. I'll put it into different words, or the words I like to use. But the way that technology should be looked at, right, is developing a human optimized agency is Ryan Hanley's term. But really, how does technology support the human interaction, right? Especially in insurance, where at least where we're at today, it it seems to be that the consumer still wants somebody, a person, to help them through various stages of the insurance buying transaction, right? Um, and so, where can we leverage technology to take those things off of our plate that are not client and value centric and allow us as the humans more time to spend with our clients, right? Build relationships, show value, all of those things. And I think so to put what you said into different words, I 100% agree with that because I think that's where AI can be a huge tool for our industry because you'll get into what you're doing with Brightside, but just taking that policy analysis as one simple example from a 3-hour project to a 10-minute project, is massive. That's a lot of time back in our day to be able to spend with our clients, right? And not be analyzing policies or have multiple people on our team that are analyzing policies. And so that's the lens at which at least I look through it, and I think people should, is what are those areas that are not value centric to my client, and how can I go and find potential technology solutions to do that. And so I don't know if you have any comments on that, but that's kind of how I like to frame that.
No, absolutely. The way kind of when I've kind of boiled that down into one sentence for me in the past too, it's AI is not a replacement, it's a supplement.
Yeah.
And so whenever we can sit back and say, how can it make your life easier? Not to replace your life, not to go take on all the E&O exposure that I know every agent and broker out there is thinking and or asking as well. Because there's agents and brokers have a fiduciary duty to the client, right? Legal fiduciary duty to the client to be able to give them kind of the best service. AI is not coming in to replace that. It's coming in to help make you smarter, help make you more efficient, help make you be more productive at the end of the day. Two, focus on the relationship, focus on the client, to focus on driving value-added activities to be able to leverage AI to be able to make your life easier. Policy analysis, policy comparison, discovering coverage gaps, and the list goes on.
Yeah.
So how can you take some more of the quote unquote mundane tasks, the required tasks, the needs of insurance, but really doing it more, I'd say, kind of optimized way across the board.
Yeah. No, I think that's spot on. Couldn't agree more. And then I think the where we're at in the industry again, I think it's a very exciting time. Those analogies that you gave are spot on, and we'll see where all of this goes. But it's a cool time to be in the industry. I don't know that even the other shifts that you mentioned, I think, are going to pale in comparison to how fast this shift is going to go. And in the future, we're not even going to know that some of these tools are Gen AI tools, right? Like right now, everything
Right.
is, it's the new thing, and so it's being labeled on everything. But the fundamental backbone of some of the technologies that we use are most likely going to be run by some form of whether it's generative AI or other forms of quote unquote AI. But that's just how fast the technology is moving, and that's what's pretty exciting.
100%. I mean, we're not hearing nowadays that said, "Hey, I found it on the internet." Like, of course, you found it on the internet, but it's not leading Zoom dot internet, you know?
Yeah.
And so it's, yeah, we're at that stage now where AI is kind of the driver. It's being adopted within the technology, but give it 12, 18, 24 months, 5 years, 10 years from now, it's just going to be a way of business.
Yeah.
You know, folks are going to be looking at what is the end result, not what was it that got you there, right? Just similar to kind of the cell phones and or the internet even now, right? I
Internet's
mean,
a great correlation. Yeah.
we'll get there with the end. They'll ask for the end result. We'll want the end result, but we're not going to be saying I use the cell phone to get me here, you know, to determine and figure it out. I use the internet to get me here. It's all kind of assumed at
Yeah.
that, right? And that's the way that AI is going to be doing it as well too. It's just going to be assume that this is where it's at. And it also gets to the standpoint of our kids aren't going to know a day without AI as a whole. And they're going to be sitting there saying, Mom and Dad, how did you guys do this without AI? Just as we may have looked at prior generations, say, how did you get around with with a paper map
Yeah.
versus maps on
Yeah.
your phone, or not having a cell phone, or without the internet? And so that's the stage that we're at right now, and fun times for sure.
Yeah. Isn't that funny to think back on like all of the technology that we just take for granted today? But I mean, you used to have to, it wasn't that long ago, you had to print out MapQuest directions,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
and now it's just you tell your phone to navigate to whatever and it just goes. And eventually
exactly,
your car's just gonna go there, right? Like it's just
exactly.
it's wild. When you
Yeah, exactly. Same thing's happening with AI right now too. We're at that transitory stage right now that'll get us there, where we'll just be looking at that end result where we really won't know a world without it. And it's exponentially going to be getting faster and faster and smarter and smarter. And we're already seeing that in the industry as well. I mean, just kind of the past 12 months that it's become more mainstream
yeah,
across the board too.
yeah, totally. So before we hit on to some of the more specific benefits that you guys are utilizing the technology for, let's talk about what we know is on everybody's mind with AI right now. But you know, the fear around it, the concern around it, especially in our industry, which is you know highly regulated and has a lot of client data. Um, how or how should people think about that? You know, if they're concerned about client data and protecting client data and how is that being used, and I've heard the horror stories and you know all of those things, but walk us through that a little bit. You know, how can we not only protect ourselves and our clients data, but what should we be looking at in these tools to help do that as well?
Yeah, for sure. So I'd say taking data privacy is something that's it's a fundamental. It's table stakes. It is just part of the game. Whenever we're kind of taking this and taking a look at this within the scope of applying AI within insurance. So a couple big picture items as a whole is that the underlying what we call LLMs, large language models across the board, are almost kind of to some extent becoming commoditized in today's environment. It's almost like saying you have AWS and Microsoft Azure, you know, across the board. Of course, there are differences, but broadly speaking, you can use the cloud. Same thing with some of those underlying models. Well, what we do is we will then interact with some of these underlying models. And then what we then do is we kind of have a layer on top of it that we specifically focus on the insurance industry. With that layer on top of it, we do a lot of, I would say, kind of different privacy concerns where we don't want to ever use client information to train these underlying LLMs. So we create settings and we create protocols around it that no client information is ever being able to be used to train those models, right? In a broader sense across the board. That's, I'd say, a big differentiator than somebody that I see a lot of times people just saying, an individual agent say, I'm just going to upload it all to ChatGPT,
Ooh,
right?
yeah, that's
Right? And right there, all the information is getting exposed out into the wide open. And so I would say there are I'd say things to be aware of, you know, instead of kind of going out just directly to a personal ChatGPT like account, you know, or a Gemini for Google or something else along those lines. But it's to be able to leverage a software that does have, I would say, good privacy and data protocols in place, right? It's kind of trying to make sure they are compliant, right? In the evolution, they're SOC 2 compliant, you know, or other type of certifications across the board to be able to do that. And then really not being able to use that information to train some of the underlying models. With AI, of course, right? We're at that stage now where it's that balancing act. It's many benefits and potentially many risks as it continues to get smarter. But how do we, I'd say, continually mitigate those risks? And one of the other things that I will always say too is that AI is not gospel. And so effectively having to be aware of that, that again, it comes back to the supplement, not a replacement front on that piece of it as well. That the other big thing that folks have to consider is also hallucinations.
Hmm.
And so in the AI industry as a whole, hallucinations are effectively whenever the model makes up an answer and gives it back to you with confidence. And you think it's right, but it's actually extremely wrong.
Yeah.
And so how can we continue to train the models where it's not giving misinformation? That we ask it to check itself and then check itself and check itself again and have these circular loops. That also gets to kind of your data privacy and data accuracy piece of it as well, as whenever we try to the best of all of our abilities, at least right now, try to minimize hallucinations within the context of being able to provide answers as well. So those are, I'd say, some of the broad historical, broad kind of overarching themes around what to kind of be aware of whenever it comes to kind of data privacy, is also kind of data accuracy as well.
Yeah. So would it be fair to say the analogy I was thinking about in my mind on from a client's data security perspective, where we're not sending client information to OpenAI or to Microsoft or to Google or whatever, that we shouldn't be, is you mentioned, you have the underlying LLM, which is OpenAI and their LLMs or whatever, or Google or whoever. And then you have the layer on top, which is the insurance specific. Would it be fair to say that you've kind of got one tube going from their LLM to your uh, layer on top with nothing going back, right? So you're pulling the information from them, but not sending anything back. Is that
Correct. So
a fair
yeah,
way
so we'll
way to
pull
say it?
information. Yeah, we'll pull information from them, but we also have to kind of push information to them too in order to be able to get the results, right? It's what I would kind of call retrieval. So we would push it to them to be able to get the retrieval of that information and the output that we want. But we do not let the underlying LLMs then use that information to train it,
Got
right?
it.
To be able to get smarter for somebody else's, right? Or use that client information to train it for somebody else's as well. So we're not
Living in
sharing.
your own sandbox. Yeah.
That's correct. So it has its own kind of, yeah, sandbox, right? So to say that we are not leveraging and or sharing that customer information across the board. Again, that's very, I'd say, tailored information. A lot of kind of different insurance policies depending on the type of business you are. Many companies view that as proprietary information in a big way. Some of it is kind of their secret sauce to some extent, depending
Mhm.
on the industry that you're working in as well too. So making sure that there is robust data privacy protocols in place is what I kind of call nowadays just table stakes to operate. And I take that from, again, all the historical experience living in the insurance industry and recognizing the importance
Yeah.
in terms of how they look at it versus maybe somebody else that's coming into it. It's like, oh, it's just insurance, right?
Yeah.
It's a different lens that we apply to it.
Well, certainly. And, ultimately we're in the risk management industry. And so it's important that we manage our own risk, right? And the risk of our clients. And so I want to dive into Brightside more specifically. So I don't know even how I came across. I think something you posted on LinkedIn or whatnot about what you guys are doing, but um, there are so many applications to the technology that um, I think everybody needs to understand and know, and just what, like, even if it's not Brightside, just what is capable with these types of tools, right? So just talk through, how would you describe Brightside in general? And then, I can get into even some of the use cases that I can see as well, but how would you describe it overall?
Yeah, so if I were to just give that high level quick summary is Brightside is effectively an AI tool specifically focused on the insurance industry, more specifically insurance agents and brokers, to be able to leverage AI to make their lives easier. So that's the top punchline. And then you sit into, okay, what's that actually mean? And what it means is that take any given document, take a quote, a binder, a policy, take a certificate of insurance, take an insurance contract, you name it, and be able to upload it to Brightside, and then you could effectively interact with it and ask it anything you want. Not only can you interact with one document, but you can also interact with 2 or 3 documents at any given time as well too. So I'll give you a couple examples of specific use cases. We could ask it to tell me what the limits of the policy are, right? In a matter of seconds, it'll come back and pull it for you. You could ask it a potential claim scenario. My dog bit somebody, do I have coverage? And so again, it's oftentimes what I will allude to is that I call it kind of the endless control F game.
Mm-hmm.
Control F, hunt the document and search. Now I can actually just ask it. And so again, help me supplement and be able to think through a potential claim scenario. I could ask it to discover the coverage gaps. So a lot of times I could be looking to win a piece of new business, and I want to be able to review their policy, and I want to tell them what they should be aware of and not be aware of. Well, let me go ahead and just ask Brightside. And so we could help it to discover the coverage gaps. And what it would then do is it would see, all right, what are some of the exclusions that we should be aware of? What are some of the potential gaps within the policy as well, too? So those are, I would say, kind of a couple quick examples there. We could also be able to ask it 2 documents. So imagine you're trying to win a new client and you're trying to go present a new proposal to them, and you went out to market and you've gotten 2 to 3 different quotes. And now you want to be able to take those 2 to 3 different quotes and put it into a summary over here and go present that to your client. A lot of times right now, and everybody has different process. The broad one is open up those quotes on one screen right here, open up your Excel file on another screen, and now start typing, going back and forth to summarize it in a pretty little chart, and then be able to go present to the client. And sat back and says, why can't I just select both of these documents, ask it to compare these quotes right now and summarize it in a table format? So instead of it not taking me hours and or days, in many instances, depending on the type of client, right, or the size of client that they're going to go present to, and do it in a matter of seconds and minutes and pull it back into a table format. So that's, I would say, a big application that we're seeing right now is on quote comparison, on policy comparison. How do you compare an expiring policy to renewal policy right
Mm-hmm.
now? And let me take that and understand what those differences are. So we are seeing the comparison, I would say, being one of the key items and key elements that majority of folks are using and leveraging very quickly. We see other folks using it for create a proposal, and create an executive summary for our client instead of having to type it all out and review it all. And so again, supplement it. How can we make them more efficient in terms of what they're doing? And the list goes on. Right now, how
Yeah.
do I create a vehicle schedule? How do I create a property schedule? And those are a handful of questions, but like I said, there could many, many more applications as well too, depending on the client.
Yeah. Well, the initial use case that we had explored was you mentioned in there, which was, we have the renewal policy that we want to compare to the expiring policy. And ultimately, we just want to know what are the changes, right? You're gonna have policy form changes, you can have endorsements, you can have all the things. And right now, we have 2 full-time people that's literally all they do, is policy comparison, just renewal and expiring, not even
Right.
if we have to remarket. And so, if we can have the tool Brightside do that same comparison, and then still, this is a great example of optimizing for the human, right? If we can have the tool do that, now I can upskill those 2 folks and say, now I want you to look at what is this tool, what's the tool telling us, and what do you need to drill down further, right? So now it's telling us that this exclusion changed. Well, what actually changed in the exclusion? Let's go look at the wording and understand how is that going to impact this construction client. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. So you can really see how now we can provide, or we can leverage the actual what the human should be good at, and leverage what the technology should be good at. The other one that I haven't explored with it quite yet, but I could see being really impactful is like the executive summary piece, right? Where, do an executive summary and include the list of exclusions and, whatever else you want to include. Because those are typically not something that we, unless you're retyping it out or whatever, which we do on proposals, and depending on, the type of client and things, because that's some of the most important things you need to be discussing with the client is the list of exclusions, right?
Right.
And so again, this is where I feel like the technology, especially as Gen AI is today, is where it's really good at, is analyzing and just parsing the information out of documents that it's reviewing. And I know there is still a risk of hallucinations and things, but when you're just asking it to extract information and put it into a different format, it is really, really accurate typically, right?
Yeah, 100%. And that's kind of why I get to the analogy of, I was talking with somebody the other day too. It's like when somebody may not know the answer to something, they're gonna oftentimes go to somebody else that also may not know the answer exactly to that thing, or they would
Yeah.
have their own personal bias to it as well. Well, why don't we actually ask technology? And if that technology can get us 50, 60, 70, 80, 99, even 100% accurate in many cases as a whole, where it's not interpreting the data, it's just extracting the data and pulling it out there. 100% agree with you that we're seeing very high accuracy levels. And also, depending upon the prompts, I would say that's another big thing right now that I would say, even early on in the onset of getting Brightside going, I would say probably had an underappreciation for prompts.
Yeah.
And that's where you begin to see the better your prompts that you ultimately have that go into the model. Give it a persona first before you ask the question. Even understanding those different dynamics begin to yield you better results at the end of the day, too.
Yeah.
So it is, what are those prompts, right, that you can fill it with before you actually ask it its question to be able to get an even more accurate answer. So instead of it just being, hey, a one liner, ask it this, knowing those prompts, knowing how to leverage it, knowing how to appropriately engage with the model itself will yield better results too. And so that gets to your point around comparison, just pulling the information out and putting it into a different format as well too.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think I just saw, talking about prompts, I think I just saw Elon posted that one of his kids turned 18, and he said, I just realized that when your kid turns 18, it's basically like 18 years of prompt engineering. I thought that was pretty funny. It's kind of like a good analogy, really, but
I agree, and it makes sense coming from Elon.
yeah, 100%.
I get it. I get it.
100%. That's so true. But yeah, I mean, the use cases are far and wide, right? And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, too, the tool Brightside, I think this is uh important, if I remember you saying, for people that are skeptical or whatnot. It also will give you, like, say you're asking it for the exclusions of the policy, it'll reference where it pulled that information from, right? So, again, important, and also still speeds up the process, or at least that's what we're looking at is, I can still have somebody double check that, spot check it, do whatever, whatever makes us comfortable over time to make sure that we're not getting inaccuracies from the tool. Is it tells you exactly where it's pulling this information from, correct?
That's exactly right. And so again, just living some of this stuff in the past before, and also recognizing that I've always and still continue to want to cross-reference it, is that we'll pull up the response. We'll also pull up the document itself right next to it. And then at the bottom of every single one of the response, we do include reference links. So it will tell us where it actually found it within the document as well, too. Go to the bottom of page X, right? Check out this paragraph here. And
Yeah.
so that is one of the big things that we early on recognize the need to be able to facilitate better trust with the model, to be able to kind of help folks be able to spot check it, review it, want to understand it in more detail as those reference links to be able to actually see where it says that in the policy, so somebody could quickly go and see where it's actually getting pulled from.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's important to note too, because you, again, I'm only familiar with Brightside for the little bit of time that we've dealt with, and I haven't really evaluated many other tools, but you all have built in a lot of those safeguards. I don't know if that's the right term, but ways to make people feel comfortable to spot check the tool and make sure that it's accurate, which is most important. At the end of the day, we as the human and as the advisors are the one responsible for being in the loop. I would say having a human in the loop is important with AI, especially right now, and making sure that the information is accurate and correct. Um, but again, the technology is only getting better and is only going to keep getting better as we continue to use it. So, what do you have any use cases, data from firms that are using or have used Brightside for a while and the impact that's having? I'm just curious if you have anything off the top of your head on.
Yeah, so Right now, we're working with folks that may want to have it be used at one or two people at their shop, all the way to we're working with some of the larger reinsurance and largest brokers in the world right now. And so the reason why I say that is that a specific use case that comes in, it's I'd say kind of a more of a kind of a smaller but mid-tier shop that I was talking with them just the other day. And they said that they will oftentimes they will have somebody, they'll kind of be pumping through 15 to 20 different renewals every single day. Each one may take them 1 hour a piece. So let's just take 15 to 20 hours across the multiple people that they had looking at this every single day. And so they were looking at this and they said, you know what, Aaron? Well, the policy comparison and the analysis that we're able to do, we're able to actually take what's being done in 1 hour and turn it into roughly 1 minute right
Yeah.
now with an actual question. And I went back to him. I said, let me just make sure I'm actually hearing you right. Right. I said, so just by using this over the past month to 2 months, right now, you've been able to free up 15 to 20 hours worth of time per day times 5 days a week. Let's just take 20 times five. That's 100 hours times your 4 weeks in a year, in a month, right? That's 400 hours. And it's like, he's like, yes, absolutely. And so he's like, very quickly,
Wow.
this is freeing up significant time for our agency right now, to your point, to upscale, to start to leverage more impactful, right? Maybe client facing operations. And so that is one that was literally fresh off. I would say kind of fresh off the press in terms of being able to get that feedback right there to be able to see that impact that AI can have right now. And so we're seeing that in its infancy. We really only anticipate that growing over time when there are broader use cases. And many instances right now, what I've found with folks is that the tool can do so much, it can oftentimes be overwhelming for people right
Yeah.
now, the stage of this. So we're actually kind of trying to bring it down to a couple use cases. Just start here, policy comparison, right? Don't worry about anything else until you've got the policy comparison, right? Okay, then move on to create an executive summary and a proposal, and so start one, then start two, then start three. And very quickly over time, right, those early adopters will start to realize the compounding effect of that, and it really start to transform an agency and a brokerage shop very quickly. And
Yeah.
so kind of free up that time across the board. So that would be one use case example based on some real world kind of feedback that we got just recently.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I'm sure there's some people out there thinking of the doomsday scenario that this is going to replace us all and think about the job loss and all of that. And I want to encourage people. I mean, to me, this type of technology and technology in general, AI is the next iteration, right? Or an iteration, um, is only going to allow us to continue to grow and scale in an ever increasingly difficult labor market, right? So now in that use case, that firm has the capacity now to continue to grow without having to hire people at the same level, because it is, we all know, difficult to go out and hire people. So I would imagine you're not going to have many firms that are going and laying off people. They're going to do exactly what we mentioned, and they're going to say, how can we retool and upskill so that we can continue to grow and continue to provide value for our clients? Um, Without having to grow the labor side at the same rate, because that's just becoming more difficult and more difficult to do. So there's a lot of positives in the future, I think, for what we're going to be able to do with some of this technology, and I'm just excited that we've met and we can have these conversations, because I'm really excited about what you guys are doing. So on that note, how can folks learn more about you or what you're doing at Brightside? How can they get in touch to see what you guys are doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say go to www.brightsideai.com. Very quick to be able to go there, check it out directly on the site. Anybody can email me and ping me directly at aaron@brightsideai.com, or just reach out on LinkedIn as well too. So very accessible. I would say anybody wants to reach out, want to dig in, we can dig into a demo. We can dig into the different use cases that we have as well too. And again, I would also kind of double down on your comment as well too, is that AI is here. It's not going to be going away now,
No.
and it is only going to, I would say, be getting better. Yes, of course, there are items that we have to kind of make sure that we continue to mitigate, right? With any new technology, similar to how the internet came on and then you have the black market,
Yeah.
right? And then how you also have cell phones that came on and were being used by not so good people,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Same thing, right? With AIs, how do we mitigate those risks? But it's a technology that's here. It's a technology that's here to stay. And I would say the sooner that folks continue to embrace it, the better it's going to help supplement them. They'll be a little bit ahead of the curve on it as well too. We are that tip of that spear right now. We are in that, if you've ever seen the kind of the innovators curve, where you
Yep.
have kind of the first 2.5%, the real innovators, and then kind of the early adopters and so forth. We are in that innovation stage. And so we will see that it will get to those kind of the other parts of the curve as well too. And so again, it's a technology that really is intended to help optimize folks' lives, make it easier. And so I just encourage everybody to give it a try, test it out. It's a new muscle that needs to be
Yep.
worked. It was for myself as well too, but now there's not many things that I don't do without some form of AI open in a browser somewhere right
Yeah.
now. Really kind of to make things a little bit easier too.
It's awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Aaron. This was great. Enjoyed the conversation, enjoyed having you on, and I'm a big believer in the tool. So want everybody to check it out.
Awesome, Elliot. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Yep, you got it. Talk soon.
All righty. Bye.